Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. We are only 1 week away from the start of the CDL, but the pros are still at odds over the potential ban of the M4. Up to 4 M4s per team per map we are seeing right now behind the scenes in scrims. What are the potential solutions, or should it just be banned outright? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. USA from Scump. I mean, man, honestly, that performance last night was so shocking from England. I can't believe it. The US played well. I've got to give you guys credit. Actually tried to, I mean, look, you guys, I don't know if the US deserved the win, but I mean, like, certainly great value for the points. Were the better team over the course of it. Like, defended well, had great shape, and like, England, man, honestly, that is the performance under Southgate that I expect to see every time we play. Iran was clearly just a massive outlier, because that's the kind of just conservative, so boring play. It's so frustrating to me as well, because I know that a lot of Americans would have been watching this expecting a really entertaining game, which those teams could have delivered with, I think, different coach. I know the US guys also aren't happy with the way their coach manages the play as well, with all the attacking options off the bench they could have gone for, but still wasn't the case. So yeah, really frustrating game to watch, especially just because I know that a lot of people would have watched this like expecting some fireworks, and you know, it was obviously a lot of hype for this match, right? And with football not being that big of a thing in the US, like when the World Cup happened and the US are qualified, this is a good time for people to get interested, especially for a match like England-US, and then the teams, well, England certainly, didn't even really turn up to try and deliver anything interesting. So yeah, frustrating really, because like this could have been a really entertaining affair with loads of memes and drama and stuff like that, and then we just get an absolute slugfest for 0-0 for 90 minutes, and probably the most, I mean, I've watched most of the World Cup games, that was probably the most boring I've seen so far. So, and you know, Octane, of course, look, it's a faded take from Octane, but I can't exactly blame him, given, you know, what we saw last night. But yeah, I would just say England was shocking, the game is awful, but generally the group stages are not going to be as entertaining as the knockout stages anyway, and I do think the US are good value to qualify anyway. I feel like you guys should beat Iran probably. Like, it'll be a tough match, but I mean, we'll see how that goes, and I think the US would be good value for a place in the knockout stages. So yeah, the tournament would just keep getting better and better, but man, last night was just tough to watch, right? And even, of course, like, it's easy when the whole football soccer thing is getting debated to just bait everyone on Twitter. Jacob does a good job right here, and as Cap says, you picked COD over it, bro, because Pred used to play football in Australia, and then he decided to go for COD, and he says, because COD at the time was a way better opportunity, you're tweaking, bro. You could be putting on for Australia at the World Cup right now, instead you're listening to Lamar ask you why you hit scrap time, and as Jacob says, great logic here, 48 COD Pro starters in the world, 352 pro soccer players attending the World Cup, numbers never lie, bro, and then of course he went on to say, well, yeah, there's more people who play football than Call of Duty, so what's going on? And then he looks at the numbers and says, actually, well, there's 250 million people who play COD, and there's, you know, kind of, well, I don't know, similar numbers that play football, I guess, technically. So actually the math checks out, and being a professional football player is easier than being a professional COD player, which, yeah, over 7 times easier to make the cup. Of course, there's more factors at play here, but I thought it was funny to look at nonetheless. Just because we talked about Doug dropping 4, thought this is funny because people were atting me and Doug in this. That one guy in the hardpoint with, well, 2 minutes in the hardpoint for 7 kills. So this is Doug Martin, but yes, he is certainly an SMG living in an AR's world right now. It must be like, okay, Doug might not be great at this game, but the way the meta is currently playing out is definitely not beneficial to SMG players. And just a quick note on Boston Beans, because he was playing this 3v3 tourney, I'm pretty sure back in Europe right now, but yeah, I don't know what Beans is thinking about Doug and that potential roster going forwards. But this is the key discussion right now within the pro scene. What about the meta going into the first event? I mean, the first match is on December the 2nd. Like, it is not far around the corner. We saw back in Cold War when the first entire major cycle was played out with the XM4, then that was banned after the first major cycle for the rest of the year. I do wonder whether a similar thing will happen here, but we full well know that there are 10 ARs out of the 12 players in the representative GA chat, and Rambo made it clear the other day that evilly's players in there are basically looking out for themselves rather than what's for the betterment of their team, but also for the betterment of, well, the enjoyment for competitive play and the skill gap and this type of stuff. Because a few years ago back in Advanced Warfare, people used to call it Call of Duty Battle Warfare. I even found this today from a Steam forum back in 2014, Call of Duty Battle Warfare, because the pre-patch BAL was basically the only gun used. I mean, it was often 3-4 BALs per map, per team, like pretty outrageous stuff. But we have a similar meta in the current state of the game. In what world is it okay? The meta in scrims is literally 3 or 4 ARs on a map, besides very specific kills. And sometimes you see the ARs complaining about the Vaznev, but the M4 M4 is just once again the dominant weapon. It's kind of annoying because the first few days of this game were actually quite exciting from a meta perspective. The Kastov-74u was viable, then that got banned immediately. Then it was the Scar that pros were using, and then they figured out that actually the M4 is definitely the way to go. Now, well, no smoke grenade in respawn. Haggy will talk about this point in a second here because, yeah, the smoke grenade might be a way to solve some of these issues. Theoretically, right, let's say you're on the Fortress map and you're getting spawn trapped into Brute Oblivion on one of the sides there by all the ARs setting up on head glitches and power positions. If you've got a smoke grenade, you can get around it, right? And it was allowed, I think, in Modern Warfare 2019, maybe not for the entire season, but like, because right now you're allowed one smoke grenade in Surge, but they've banned them from respawn because, like, I understand why. I think we've seen in the past that players like aBeZy and others, if you're allowed one smoke grenade per team, per hardpoint map, you can run into a hardpoint to drop the smoke grenade and then make an absolute chaos, right? You get the one-way effect, you get the lack of aim assist, bit of a mess. And you can't really GA it, because we saw at the start of last season, right, was it Drazah versus Simp, or there was some drama because Drazah dropped like a smoke grenade or something, got a kill, and then it was considered that was GA'd to use the smoke grenade in that manner. So, and then, you know, it was kind of a bit of a question over the course of the year, and they had to ban the smokes, all this type of stuff. But still, maybe to make the ARs less effective, they need to allow a smoke grenade, right? That's kind of what Parasite is here suggesting. Now, Simp basically says, well, even as, yeah, how I feel running a sub in this game, times at 3 says Doug. So the SMGs are not having a good time. It is interesting, though, to see, because the SMGs that, I mean, look, it's obviously a difficult game to run a sub in, and it could arguably show to some degree a skill gap, right? Because if you're a really good sub, you're going to be probably significantly separating yourselves away from an SMG that's not so good, because it's difficult to succeed. So there is a bit of a skill gap in that sense. But yeah, for the ARs, maybe not so much. Now, you know, a Sim comes out, GA the M4. Now this, if we look in the replies here just quickly, we've got Bance, GA the M4, even Bo's coming in. We'll see what Slasher says in a second. Asim, Brian Sate, yes, a lot of guys from the Minnesota Rokkr. And even Killer, though, reckons, you know, you just GA stuff that's OP, and then something else becomes OP, same stuff every year. So I think Killer's probably on the right money here. But a lot of the pros are super down to get rid of the M4. We believe that OpTic are in favour as well, based on what Rambo said the last few days. But there are a couple of teams or a couple of players that are holding out to getting rid of it, even though right now the meta just seems pretty terrible. I haven't really seen much of it in play because we don't get to see the scrims. We'll see the gameplay in less than a week's time when the season starts. But yeah, 3 or 4 M4s per map per team, like, does not sound like a good and viable, sustainable meta to me. It needs to be 2-2 at the very least. Like 3 or 4 ARs is just pretty outrageous. I'm surprised the pros haven't got rid of it yet, to be honest. But that's the thing. Certain teams that have a lot of AR players and are kind of favoured in that sense will be very much down for it, right? I'm sure Florida Mutineers are thinking, damn, why don't we get rid of our ARs and bring in some actual SMG talent on the roster rather than, you know, because if they had last year's roster with this meta, they'd be absolutely flying. Even Parasite thought was kind of spicy here. This has to do with GAs more than development. Pros don't know what they're doing when it comes to GAing certain things. He reckons they're faded to kind of not get rid of the M4, or just faded in general with the decisions that they have made so far. And even Sasha comes in and says, I don't know, fans and some pros were saying M4's not that good, skill gap just get better. Don't know how people are getting away with 3 or 4 sometimes. So Sasha's also in favour of getting rid of the M4. Makes sense, I guess. You've got Simp and aBeZy. You want to have them have a good time on the SMGs, but even then, maybe the skill gap is there to a degree and those guys can separate themselves from the other SMGs because it's such a hard role to play in the current state of the game. I don't know, but a lot of the teams aren't happy, and I do wonder if that kind of plays on your mind a bit, right? If you're going into a game wanting the M4 banned and the other team's running 4 M4s on the map and you're having to run into that again and again, you've got to be getting more and more frustrated than the team that actually wants to keep the M4 in. So I don't know if that actually affects the results at the end of the day, but it could be important. And even as Bance reckons here, I'm still spawning into this Fortress map, sometimes with 8 M4s. So apparently this is the map where it's most prevalent on Fortress. 8 M4s per map, like, well, 4 per team, like everyone's using an M4. So, I mean, this is pretty ridiculous, right? There's no longer an SMG or an AR role. You've got like, okay, you've got one sub, you've got a flex really, who sometimes runs a sub maybe, and sometimes runs an AR, depending on the hard points, and then you've got at least 2 effectively main ARs. So, I mean, look, some teams that's going to suit, some teams that's not going to suit. Most teams want the M4 gone. The thing is, if you get rid of the M4, does that really solve the problem? Because then, as Killer said, then you get to the Scar, and it's like, well, okay, is the Scar just going to become the M4 because it's kind of a do-it-all AR? Now, Parasite reckons that you can't really get away with 3 Scars. Like, I don't think the Scar is good enough to be able to use 3 of them. I think, honestly, I'd prefer a meta where the Scar, the TAC, right, would be the dominant weapon, but, or at least, like, the AR that is used, I don't really know if it's good enough to get rid of using 3 of them on a map. The other option that Parasite mentions is quite an interesting one, is the gun that was banned in the first few days of the game, the Kastov-74u. What about they bring that back? Now, this is kind of like an AR weapon, but it can be used as an SMG, and that is kind of the way it was being used at the start of the game, and in fairness, there were like a lot of Kastovs on the map, and if you allow the Kastov-74u back in, then probably you have a lot of Kastov-74us in play, and maybe that doesn't make things better, but you might therefore have a 3 SMG, the 74u, and 1 AR M4 meta, which is probably better than what we currently have. But is that really the way to go? I'm not so sure it's the ideal. And then as Parasite says, allow a smoke and respawn. This might be the idea. Yes, it creates some randomness, but it does mean you actually can get out of these crazy spawn traps that are caused by the ARs, and the SMGs don't have to try and take on these long range fights, which are just impossible with the setups that the ARs can have, the lack of kind of advanced movement, and also just how quick you die in this game in the first place. If someone's set up shop, like good luck taking them off that head glitch. Some quite interesting points here actually from Parasite as well, because there has been some discussion. Well, if you just have a GA so that teams could only use 2 ARs, right? Force teams to only use 2 and have 2 SMGs, which is like an interesting discussion between the pros. The issue is that if you are in a spawn trap hard and you want to pull out an extra AR for whatever reason, or, you know, I don't know, like traditionally there might be a kill streak that comes in the sky, and to shoot it down you might want to change classes to an AR with more bullets in, or, you know, just more damage in general, and maybe you can't do that because there's a GA on it. Like, that could be pretty horrible. So yeah, just some interesting ideas here from Parasite, and you know, Slasher is definitely well on the bandwagon of getting rid of the M4. Do you think teams could get away with 3 Scars on a map? And Parasite doesn't reckon that they could, but the Scar has better handling than the M4 naturally, so I don't know if it would help alleviate the issues, but maybe it would, but it wouldn't fully fix the game. Whatever gets us 1 AR, 1 flex, 2 subs is the wave. Tired of this 2 main, 1 flex, 1 sub situation, which they're pretty much in. But then again, for the FaZe guys, is that not pretty good in a way? Because, okay, aBeZy's your sub, probably always using the SMG, but sometimes on an AR just in case. And then you've got Slasher and Cellium, right? Because Cellium, like, arguably last season on FaZe was more of a main than Arcitys was, and now you've got Slasher there as well. So I don't know, I feel like FaZe can be pretty good in this meta, to be honest. But I mean, they should be good in every meta because of the players that they have. Definitely intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comment section below. Will G'ing the M4, like, is that the way to go? Because as it stands right now, like, this meta does not sound entertaining to watch, but clearly a number of teams are not willing to get rid of it as it stands, and well, therefore it's gonna probably remain. I mean, I doubt it gets banned in the next few days before the season begins. Like, they had their chance. Maybe if those scrim days that were gonna be had, but the game was broken so they couldn't practice, maybe if that wasn't the case, they'd have had an extra few days to practice, and therefore there would have been time to make this happen. But yeah, I doubt that 1 week before the season launches, the pros will finally agree to it and change the meta. But still, the conflict is going to be continuing. AR's dominating right now, and I think that certainly favours some teams over others. We'll see how it goes when we get to the first matches in less than a week's time at this point. And just to finish out with this here from Brian Stats, pros that won a tourney the year after winning champs. This is a crazy stat to me, actually. The fact that only a few players have even won an event in their following season. Kind of crazy how significant the champs curse is. Now, one team that did manage it always, or the entire team did, was back in United, right, in Black Ops 4 going into Modern Warfare 2019. They all did win an event that season. But apart from that, no other champs winner has won an event in the next season, apart from Karma, who did it a couple of times, Parasite, Crim, Aches, and JCap. But it's a very exclusive club, and it does make you wonder whether there'll be another 4 names added to this list in Kenny, Envoy, Drazah, and Octane for the Los Angeles Thieves. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.